The title, You Only Die Twice, sounds like a joke or a movie title, but for Zizek, it is a deadly serious philosophical concept. We normally think death is just death, the end of our biological life. But Zizek, following Lacan and Sade, argues that there are in fact two deaths. The first death is biological death. This is the natural physical death that every living creature faces. It is part of the cycle of nature. Things are born, grow old, decay, and die. This is just a biological event. The second death, symbolic death, this is much stranger. It is not the death of your physical body, but the death of your symbolic identity. It is the erasure of your name, your meaning, your place in the social and historical record. It is being completely forgotten, excluded from the memory of the community, or having your story rewritten by the victors. Think of a disgraced politician or a traitor. They might be physically alive, but in the eyes of society, they are already dead. Their name is erased from history books. No one speaks of them. This is a kind of symbolic death. Conversely, a hero who died in battle might live forever in songs and monuments. Their biological death was real, but they achieved symbolic immortality. The gap between these two deaths is very special, terrifying, and even sublime space. It is the space of ghosts or the living dead and of figures like Antigone or Hamlet's father. Zizek uses Shakespeare's Hamlet to make this crystal clear. The ghost of Hamlet's father is a perfect example of the space between two deaths. King Hamlet suffered his first death, he was murdered. However, he did not receive a proper symbolic death. Why? Because he was killed by his own brother, who then married his wife and took the throne. The murder was a secret. The king died without confessing, without his murder being avenged, and without his name being honored. Because his symbolic accounts have not been settled, he cannot rest in peace. He returns as a terrifying undead spectre, demanding that his son Hamlet finish the job, avenge the murder, and restore his symbolic place. The ghost represents the unbearable persistence of a debt that has not been paid. Once Hamlet kills Claudius and restores the proper order, the ghost will be able to truly die. His symbolic death will be complete. He will finally cross the gap between the two deaths and pass into peaceful oblivion. This is why Lacan says you only die twice. You must die biologically and you must have your symbolic existence wrapped up, concluded, settled. If not, you become like Hamlet's father, a restless, horrifying ghost. Sade, the infamous philosopher of transgression, also understood this gap. In his writings, victims are often subjected to the most horrific tortures, yet they remain beautiful and alive. How is this possible? Sade is not just writing bad horror, he is exploring a philosophical idea. The victim's physical body is being destroyed, the first death, but her sublime body, a body made of pure enjoyment, jouissance, survives intact. This is the fantasy of the indestructible body. We see it today in cartoons like Tom and Jerry. The cat gets blown up by dynamite, flattened by a steamroller, or chopped into pieces. In the next scene, he is perfectly fine. Why? Because the cartoon cat possesses a body beyond his ordinary physical one. He exists in a gap between the two deaths. He dies 100 silly biological deaths, but he never suffers the second death, the erasure of his character. We see the same logic in video games. Your character has three lives. You can lose a life, first death, but the game isn't over until you lose your last life. The final loss is the second death, the end of the game, the erasure of your progress and identity within that game world. The totalitarian communist, as depicted in Stalinist propaganda, is also such an indestructible figure. He is made of special stuff for Iron Man. He can be tortured, imprisoned, and starved, but he never breaks. He exists beyond normal human weakness, in the space between the two deaths. He is likely a holy martyr or a terrifying monster. So, what is the famous Freudian death drive? It is not a simple biological urge to die or return to an inorganic state. For Lacan, the death drive is precisely the drive to achieve the second death. The death drive is the stubborn, irrational, compulsive repetition that goes beyond the pursuit of pleasure and survival. It is the force that makes a hero sacrifice their happy life for a cause. It is the force that makes a revolutionary risk everything, not for material gain, but to redeem the past. The death drive is what pushes us to ignore our biological self preservation in order to settle a symbolic debt, to complete a mission, or to achieve a permanent, meaningful place in the symbolic order. The tragic hero, like Antigone, does not want to simply die. She is willing to die in order to give her brother a proper burial, to achieve his symbolic death and her own heroic place in memory. She is driven by the death drive. Zizek connects this idea to the Marxist philosopher Walter Benjamin. Benjamin had a terrifying and radical view of history. He said that every victory in history is a disaster. Why? Because the winners write the history books. When the ruling class wins a war or a revolution, they don't just kill their enemies, they also perform a second death on them. They erase the memory of the losers. They write them out of the story. They turn real life, real people with dreams and hopes into a blank space, a forgotten footnote, or a traitor. The losers suffer not just physical defeat but symbolic annihilation. Their names become meaningless. This is why Benjamin said, even the death will not be safe from the enemy if he wins. The victor can reach back into the past and kill the dead again by changing their name. A failed revolution is not just a failure, it becomes in the victor's history book a meaningless riot or a criminal conspiracy. Its real, hopeful meaning is destroyed. For Benjamin, the point of a true revolution is not just to change the future, it is to perform a miracle, to reach back into the past and redeem all those who suffered that second death. A successful revolution retroactively changes the meaning of past failures. It says those rebels were not traitors, they were our heroic forerunners. It brings them back from symbolic death and gives them eternal, honorable meaning. The revolutionary act is an act of the death drive, it is a fight against the second death. This also helps us to understand the difference between a traditional king and a modern totalitarian dictator. The king's power comes from a kind of illusion. We treat him as a king, and because we do, he is a king. But this truth must be hidden. The king must pretend his power comes from God, nature, or ancient tradition. He must seem to be an ordinary human plus something extra. He occupies the space between the two deaths, but he needs an external source to justify it. The totalitarian leader, Stalin or Hitler, the leader is more cynical and also more terrifying. He openly admits the secret. He says, I am nothing. I am just an expression of your will. The people are the real source of power, and I am merely your representative. This seems more honest, but is a deeper trap. Why? Because the leader's claim to legitimacy is based on something that doesn't really exist. The people as a single, unified, harmonious body. This people is a fantasy. It doesn't exist in reality. So the leader says, I serve the people. But because the people don't truly exist as a perfect unity, he must create them through his rule. He points to anyone who opposes him and says, you are not a real person, you are an enemy of the people. The leader's rule is an endless attempt to make the fantasy of the people come true, and he proves he is their leader by eliminating the scapegoats who threaten his fantasy. Zizek contrasts totalitarianism with democracy. The great innovation of democracy is not that the people rule, the great innovation is that the place of power is left empty. In a democracy, a president or prime minister occupies the highest office, but everyone knows they are just a temporary placeholder. They are a flawed human being. In a few years, they will be gone and someone else might take their place. The position of power is separate from the person who fills it. This is the whole point of democratic elections. For a brief moment, society admits its own contingency and randomness. The king is not dead, but the concept of the king as a fixed, immortal, sublime being is dead. In a democratic election, we throw the rascals out, and for a moment, society dissolves into a chaotic collection of individuals. The outcome is random, a matter of chance and counting votes. This risk, this willingness to accept the empty place of power, is what makes democracy possible. Totalitarianism refuses this emptiness. It insists that the place of power must be filled by a real living person, the leader who perfectly embodies the people, the nation, or the class. The totalitarian dream is to close the gap between the two deaths, to make the symbolic and the real one and the same. This is why totalitarianism is so violent. It cannot tolerate the messy, imperfect, empty space that is freedom. In short, Zizek teaches us that our symbolic identity, our name, our honor, our place in history is as important as our physical life. There is a terrifying gap between our biological end and our symbolic erasure. The death drive is our compulsive need to bridge this gap to settle our symbolic accounts. Fascism tries to fill the gap with a living leader, while democracy learns to live with a gap, accepting that the throne must always remain empty.